Hey guys, welcome to the Dr. Carter Vet podcast. This is the first episode of the BVI series and the first of the Dr. Carter Vet podcast series. Hopefully you like it. Don't forget hit that subscribe button if you're listening in Apple Music. Welcome, nice to have you. Subscribe to the channel. If you're looking at the video on YouTube podcast, then again, you might have some clips of what we experienced at that point. But subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and enjoy. Today I'm going to be giving you a story. It's from way back in 2017. It was a really emotional moment back then. I went off on a humanitarian veterinary mission to the BVI, assisted by the Virgin Group to help after the devastation of the BVI by Hurricane Irma. It was September 2017. My part of this journey started on a regular Saturday morning. It was a few days after the hurricane destroyed the BVI, USVI, St. Martin, all those countries up there. My mother lives in the USVI and my youngest sister lives in St. Martin. So at that point, I was really emotional because I didn't hear from them for a few days. But Grenadians normally say, no news is good news. I knew they were okay, but I really wanted to go up there and help. It was a really strong hurricane season in 2017, so much destruction. Anyway, so back to how it started for me and how I got involved in this. It was a regular Saturday morning. I was sitting home with a couple of my friends when a vet student messaged me. Her name was Anastasia. I think it was Anastasia. Correct me if it wasn't Anastasia. But a vet student messaged me telling me about there was this guy with an island with exotic animals who needed a vet to help because the hurricane had destroyed them. And do I know anyone or will I be able to do it? I remember I told her, well, I don't know anyone, but let me get back to her for a minute. While I was discussing it with the guys, I was like, would you take care of my animals? One said yes. I was like, okay then. I don't know how long I'll go for, but yeah, I think I'll do it. So I messaged her back and I told her, yeah, I'm going to do it. I could do it, It was right up my cup of tea. So then I think it worked like this. She gave me another guy's number to contact and I messaged him telling him, well, I was a veterinarian, I could come. And he told me he was going to leave at 2 p.m. I was like, okay, well, I should be ready by then. That was about 10, 11 in the morning. So I pack a quick bag, I pack all my vet stuff. I pack a couple of clothing items. Clothing was not important. Then I packed so much vet medicine. I packed my surgery gear. Anything I thought that I would need. I was a mobile veterinarian who went and did anything and everything everywhere. So going to an island to do vet stuff wasn't too bad, I already did vet stuff on an island. So anyway, called my sister up and I told her, listen, I need some help. If you drive me down with the car, with my car, and you have to bring it back up because I don't know how long I'd be or where I'd be going. I charged my phone up as little as I could. I expected, I might be off the grid for a while. Pack some stuff and I headed. When I got down there, they told me like anytime I get there, they would leave. But I got early because I don't believe in being late, To be late is unacceptable. So yeah, I got there pretty early. We had a last lunch before we set off and we headed off for Barbados. The plan at the time was we were going to sail to Barbados in the Neckar. Neckar was a beautiful boat. Then we were going to go from Barbados up the way to the BVI. But yeah, that was the plan at least when we left Grenada. So I got the nice room. I went in there. At that point, I had no idea who Richard Branson was, I must admit. But I was in his boat. It was a really big catamaran yacht, one of those giant catamarans. It was like you were in a 5-star hotel, goldless pillowcase, a really nice shower, a big screen TV. And I'm in there like, okay. I remember they said I could look at the DVD, but I saw tape on all the cupboards. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't even open the thing. I thought like they tape it shut. But when you're on a boat in the sea and it's going up and down, you tape the cupboards shut so you don't keep opening and closing, yeah? But I didn't know that at the time because it was my first experience being on a super yacht, yeah? But anyway, I remember talking to this news editor lady and I was telling her, I'm going off to the BVI to help with animals. I mentioned Richard's name and she was like, oh, that's a good networking opportunity. But at the time, remember, I did not know who Richard was. Then she sent me a clip and I saw, oh, Richard with the Virgin Group. I was like, oh, and I looked around and it's like, Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now because yeah, at that point I did not want to go anywhere on a boat. It was my furthest journey on a boat. I've spent loads of time on the ocean since then, but that was my first long journey on a boat and it was supposed to be 48 hours on the sea. But it was
Well,
comfortable. Um, we got to Barbados. I remember meeting with Sam and everybody was there, and you would swear that we all knew each other from the get-go because we just fell in line. They
where you
decided
go?
the plans have changed. We're not going to use the boat anymore. We're going to fill the boat with provisions for the islands. So everybody just formed a line. And that's the first time I met Sam, Richard's son, Josh, and Rory. We kicked off really good. Um, when they told me, I'd be staying with Sam today. Tomorrow we're gonna fly from Barbados to Puerto Rico. They're gonna charter a flight or something. That was the initial plan. Later that evening, we found out that like a pilot volunteered. It was so much shine in those days. Like everybody stepped up big time. A pilot volunteered. He was going to go up there to help fly people off from the BVI to Puerto Rico or anywhere needed. So he volunteered to take us there. So anyway, the next morning we were going. So we take that evening opportunity to have something good to eat because we didn't know what we were going to be eating the next day or the next few days. And we relax on the beach a bit. I remember Josh making a joke that this is almost like we're on a vacation. But yeah, we were ready and we were prepared going in. We didn't know what we were going to meet there, but we knew the damage would have been significant. I remember Sam had packed a bunch of meals for everyone for 5 days provision, 3 meals a day in his backpack in case when we get there was nothing to eat. But thank God it wasn't like that. Anyway, the next day we went off really early in the morning. We jumped that little plane. We flew to Puerto Rico. I mean, I've traveled to 51, 52 countries in my life. It was the smallest plane I ever traveled on. But it didn't feel so bad once we got up in the sky. It was almost as if you could reach your hands out and touch the cloud. It was really cool. We got to Puerto Rico. The people at Puerto Rico were really nice. Richard's team was ready there to get us. All of our documents were sent ahead. So it was a really smooth transition through the airport. And we met up with everyone at the hotel. I remember that evening. That was the first time I met Richard actually. Um, so yeah, he said thank you for what you're doing. Everybody was there. There was lots of people. The people were emotional. People were meeting each other again. We haven't seen each other for years. It was a whole bunch of emotions. Some people who left the BVI to Puerto Rico to find their way home, and other people who came to Puerto Rico trying to get to the BVI to help. So there were people come from Canada. People came from all over the place. I remember meeting some good people there. But anyway, I met Helen. Helen was Richard's assistant, and she told me like the BVI is closed. But Richard's gonna talk to the premier, and the next day we plan to leave at 9 in the morning. I was like, okay then, let's see. Let's do it. I was ready. I was ready. Everybody was ready. But I slept that night. I slept really good. I remember sleeping, thinking, I don't know when I'm gonna be sleeping tomorrow or if I'll be sleeping. So let me enjoy this bed. And Sam, if Sam ever listens to this, he probably have a laugh because you never know when I'm in the room sleeping because I covered up myself with the pillows over my head and the cover over me, and I went to sleep. I slept like a baby that night. The next morning when I went down for breakfast, Helen said, okay, well, we're not going at 9 anymore, but we're going to go at 11. I remember that. I was like, okay. So it's a go. I had my bag. I was like, this bag full of the vet stuff. I did not carry a lot of personal items then. I was really thinking about just bringing as much things as I could to help as much as I could. That way my thought process was at the time. We went to one of those big helicopters because even helicopters was not available because everybody was flying helicopter in, helicopter out. I remember we did one of those big 8-man helicopter, and the airport crew that we met, they were just so helpful. They were so wonderful. To put this in perspective, Puerto Rico was hit mildly by Hurricane Irma, but they were destroyed about a week or two later by Hurricane Maria. So that was pre-Maria Puerto Rico. Everybody was really helpful. Everybody was nice. Everybody was there on a mission. And we were just so engaged. It's like everybody was on the same thought process. People that you met for 20 minutes, some people would have known each other for 20 years, but everybody was on the same mind frame. We're going to go in there, see where we can help, just go and do as much as we can. The next morning, we jump on the helicopter anyway. It wasn't a long ride over from Puerto Rico to the BVI. Really beautiful helicopter, very comfortable. One of those big. I'll put up a picture with the helicopter. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll probably see the helicopter. I'll just rotate the pics I have from the BVI because this is for a podcast primarily. If you're listening on Apple Music or YouTube Music and you're just listening, well, just imagine
Over
a
here,
really
girl.
big helicopter, a beautiful
Hey, little.
helicopter. Okay, hold on a second. Now, again, you're listening to the Dr. Carter Vet podcast on the BVI series currently. There's going to be animal noise in the background because I'm sitting outside in the Caribbean below a mango tree talking over this podcast right now. There's a rooster alarming on the side of me. There is a sheep at the back. Typical Caribbean atmosphere. But yeah, let's keep going. So, we got to the helicopter. There was everyone there besides me. I mean, the lowest worth person on the helicopter was probably $80 million man, Sam, and a bunch of billionaires. And I'm flying over to this private island. I remember cracking a joke like, is it me? Or does this feel like the Jurassic Park? Everybody started laughing. I still had some humor in me. But yeah, so we got to one of the islands on to the BVI where there was a helicopter pad for us to land, and everything was destroyed there. The house was smashed. It was really significant damage. And as we were coming into the BVI, you can see the trees were flattened, houses were flattened, a lot of large vessels and small ships and boats was up on the bank, like 40 feet, 100 feet away from the coast. Like they were up on the bank significantly. And it was like, yeah, you can see there was some serious surf action. We passed over a little place that was a restaurant on a small island, and that restaurant was flattened. There was nothing there. But yeah, there was debris everywhere. There were trees on the ground. If you have been to the BVI before Hurricane Irma, places you would have recognized. I'm sure if you've been there after Hurricane Irma, you've known it was completely flattened. I wasn't too surprised though, because from Grenada, I experienced Hurricane Ivan, which devastated almost 90% of the island, destroyed everything, flattened trees. Then we had a lesser Hurricane Maria, which didn't do as much damage. So I did live through a hurricane, experienced the damage, knew what the recovery period would be like, but nothing prepared me for what I saw in the BVI. It was worse than Ivan did to Grenada. So those of you who are not familiar with the BVI, at that point in time, I wasn't familiar with it either. You had Beef Island, which had the major airport. You had Virgin Gorda, which was one of the larger islands. You had Tortola, which had all the people. And then a couple of small islands, Mosquito Island, Eustacia Island, Necker Island. So we landed on Eustacia Island with the helicopter, and we had to take a boat over to Necker Island. And then Richard, everybody was there who were going to Necker Island, went off to Necker Island on that boat. That's the boat I was on. Then Richard also had Mosquito Island, which you could see, but relatively close to Necker Island. So if you've never been to the BVI, if you ever go to the BVI in the future, you can have some geographic relevance to where we were. So as we were going in, I remember, it was my first time being there. All the beach section with like the kayaks, I remember seeing that whole beach bar was flattened. There were kayak on the ground everywhere. Things were piled up, little hovercrafts. All the little touristy things, they were all just thrown around everywhere. I remember seeing a bunch of birds flying around. One of the first things I saw was some scarlet ibis flew when we landed. And I was like, wow, there's scarlet ibis here. I knew it'll get better for the birds, but it was really cool seeing. The other thing I remember is as we landed on the pier, Sam started to tear up because he was so emotional. And I could see that he was genuinely so emotional because he would have grown up there. It was my first time being there, and even I started getting emotional seeing the damages. But yeah, we went up to the main house, and we know now we didn't have to sleep in tents because there was a sleeping area. But as soon as I got there, they introduced me to Vaman. And Vaman was in charge of the animals. Had to pause for a minute there. You can hear the frogs and the crickets have started, so I get a really good background noise. Welcome to the authentic Dr. Carter Vet podcast, where you can hear Caribbean songs throughout. The frogs and the cricket, before they get too bad, I'll have to wrap this episode up. But let me just give you. So, I met Vaman, and he showed me some of the crew. He showed me the animal team who was left. Now, remember, after the hurricane, some people had the opportunity to be evacuated, others decided to stay. So at that point, we only met the people who decided they were going to stay and help and do as much as they could. So when I met the animal team, I went straight downstairs to see what was the first thing I could do. And I remember I named her Stumpy afterwards. She was a black and white rough lemur. She had got her hand caught up in debris and was mangled. Was one of her upper limbs. You can say it's a hand because a lemur is basically a primate, so they have hands and feet, as humans do. So most of our upper forelimb was destroyed. So I decided, you know what, we're gonna have to do an amputation. Let's do it then and there, because that was my main frame at the point in time. Do what you can, where you can, when you can. So I was really good with field surgeries and anesthesia, and I've done a lot of primate work with monkeys back in Grenada at that point in time. So I knew how to tweak the anesthesia a bit to facilitate the lemur. So I knocked her really quick. Did the amputation. It was a pretty fast surgery, because if you know anything about me and surgery, you know, I normally really fast with a knife, but good and fast. You can be fast and good. Don't be fast and sloppy. Yeah, I like pretty surgeries, pretty incision, zero scar, really fast. Anyway, so it was a good surgery altogether. Did the amputation, had on some antibiotics, bandage her up really nice, and before you know it, I woke her back up. She was quick. I had to knock her every time to do the bandage change, but the anesthesia was always on point. I remember writing down notes at the point because we didn't have internet, and I knew my phone will die eventually because there was no electricity at the moment in on the island. So I knocked her. I always took notes every day, what dosage I used, what was the effect I got, you know, because you should do these things when you meet a new animal and you're working with them under anesthesia. And it was really good. There was a couple other lemurs there. There was some ringtail lemur. There was a red ruff lemur. It was just a bit delirious. Ringtail lemur seemed to have some neurologic issues, like they got a concussion or two from the trees. But yeah, I bet you'd want to know why the lemurs are there. So let me get straight to that. So Richard had this island where he had all these animals. He had Galapagos giant tortoises, about 13 different species of lemurs, a bunch of parrots, and a lot of animals that would probably be near endangered, and you wanted to have a breeding base or something to help with the population. So unfortunately for the lemurs, I think only the ringtail lemurs were prolific breeders. There were ringtails with twins, loads of twins. I don't think I saw a triplet, but there were about 13 species of lemur. The ringtail was the most abundant. There were red-throated lemur, red ruff lemur, black and white ruff lemur, ringtail lemur, mongoose lemur. Mongoose lemurs are cute little things. They are the cutest of the lemurs, the smallest species of lemur, and the only lemur that's not only endemic to Madagascar, but also endemic to the Conamos Islands. So if you haven't seen a mongoose lemur before, go look at them. They look like fluffy mongoose, but they also look like lemurs. They have the perfect name. Probably put a picture up if you're looking on YouTube podcast with the mongoose lemur standing over my head, a pair of them. But I'll be rotating the photos anyway, so if you're looking at the video while listening to the podcast, then you would probably just see rotating videos from my experience there and photos. But if you're listening to the podcast via YouTube podcast or Apple Music, then just imagine a mongoose lemur, gray, fluffy little thing, just the size of a mongoose or bigger, but it's up in the tree because it's a lemur. But yeah, so Richard had all these islands. He also had birds as well, which scarlet ibis, as I mentioned before, that I've seen, and hundreds of flamingos. Now there was some white-cheeked pintail. Anybody know me know I'm a bird enthusiast, so I was so amazed to see so much birds there. But yeah, so there's also some of the local wildlife on the island. There was these iguanas, and I saw so much rough-looking iguanas, man. If you have been to the dry parts of the Caribbean, the iguanas there are really rough-looking and tough-looking. There was also a snake. So I remember Varman telling me there is a species of snake, there's a racer. And I spent a few days trying to find it. Eventually I did. Probably put a picture up with the racer as well. But my task there was to sort the animals out. There was a couple of flamingos that were battered. There was a young flamingo who lost his mother, so we had to start feeding it. So I did a nice choke feeding. Later, you know, most of the things you had to make was impromptu because I did not expect to be in this situation. The other thing that we had to know is that they made these hurricane boxes for the animals. So it wasn't just like they were left to fend for themselves. They made these boxes that were supposed to be hurricane proof, but I guess Hurricane Irma didn't read the labeling on the box. She destroyed it anyway. So a couple of the animals, everything, the lemurs, there were no monkeys there. A couple of the lemurs got injured, a couple of the other animals got injured. A lot of them were roaming free. So one of the first thing I did, I remember as soon as I finished the surgery with Stumpy, she was up, checked all the animal in the animal house. They had to convert a room downstairs in the main house. So that was the new animal house for all the sick animals. Went upstairs. I was like, okay, so where would I be sleeping? Because I had to put my baggage somewhere. That was the funniest thing when I remember every time. I went and did a surgery straight off the boat. And then I asked, where would I be sleeping? But put my bags down, and it was evening by that time. I think it was a long day. I asked Farman, when he's feeding so I can go with him to drive around. There was another guy named Charlie. And I went around with the feed and I got some nice food. And one of the things you do when you're dealing with wild animals, even though they're in captivity, when you're dealing with wild animals, you observe them for as long as you could without actually having to restrain them or sedate them. So the general population animal on the island, I went around feeding station to station to see who's injured, to see who's healthy, to see how they're doing. And it took a long time that they just looking at animals, giving them special food. Some of the parrots, I remember those parrots, they didn't like me. There was a blue and gold macaw. And when it came close to me, one of those green winged macaw came and he attacked me. There was also a scarlet macaw that was really mean. Parrots was crazy, but I had a cool parrot story that I'll tell you probably in another episode. But yeah, the lemurs were there. I looked at all of them, the Galapagos giant tortoises. There was supposed to be 9 tortoises on the island, yeah? But you can't tell with these giant tortoises which one you've seen before. So I developed a really good strategy. Another thing to make you see why the strategy was really cool at the time. No rain had fallen from the hurricane to when we were there. So I took duct tape and I stick it on a different scoot for every tortoise that I've met. And I got to maybe 4 before the rain came. The rain came a few days later, but I got to at least 4. And I got 4 in the 9 in the giant tortoises. But anyway, they were really cool. They just got themselves bunkered in. They were below fallen trees. They were everywhere. Tortoises can get around, and those tortoises are very strong. It's like a 500, 1,000 pound animal. It's very strong. But yeah, the other thing I noticed for the local birds, there were no flowers. All the flowers were down. All the feeding thing was down. So I decided to make a bird feeder for hummingbirds and banana quits. There were loads of banana quits on the island. So I made like this really cool concoction with some sugar water. A banana quit are nectivorous primarily, but they can also eat fruits and insects. So I made this nice sugar water and they weren't coming, man. I tried to design a little flower. They weren't coming to drink it. And one day I took the vet wrap. That was after I went off the vet and helped the horses on the other island. I took some purple and pink vet wrap and I wrapped it around the sugar water bottle. And I came home that evening and it was just hundreds of, at least 100 banana quid was just everywhere. And that night they drank so much sugar water. The next day rain came, so they dispersed again. But that was before the rain. That was a really rewarding time for me, just to go and see that all these banana quids were there. And I took that moment to assess their population. But yeah, so the other thing we did, we went down to the flamingo pond. And it's a nice big pond, brackish water pond. There was about 250 flamingos there. A couple of scarlet ibises as well. Remember those white chick pintails. So when I was feeding them, of course, all the ducks and gulls and doves came around. But I looked and I noticed there was about 5 or 6 flamingos that was limping. That was the first day. A few days later, so every day I would go feed the flamingos and I would look to see how they're doing. And eventually I noticed there was few flamingos that was limping over the days, but I'll get back to that later. So anyway, back to where we at. So I got a full assessment of what's going on, where the injured animals were, and we set a plan. Sam said he wanted to go to the mainland the next day. With all of the other things I was doing when I was up there, I had to go do travel documents. So anybody who had a US visa, Puerto Rico was accepting them, and some of them had their pets. So people were worried to leave their pets behind. So I did travel documents. I printed out a whole bunch of sheets of travel health certificates, and I came with that, knowing I'd have to do it, yeah. But I did travel documents so that people could get their animals out with them. So I went to the station. There were people sitting there. There were people distributing water. I remember when we were out there, at any point in time, a boat will come over just loaded with water, loaded with food provisions. People were trying to help. As soon as they got access to come back in, people were coming from Puerto Rico all the time with water and food provisions. They were really helpful. So I got to see a few dogs, make sure everything's okay. We set up a vet station at Spanish Town. I was on Virgin Garden. And Just had a vet day, and people know. So in the morning, I'd wake up at 6 or 5:30, went off, check all my animals in house. Know that at 9 we're going back to the main island. We head off in the boat to Virgin Gorda, drive over to the other side. But yeah, that was my schedule. Sam also said that he was going to build a soup kitchen, to feed people on the North Song. It was a steep hill. It's the highest hill I've ever seen. You drive up that hill and it's like you're going a vertical climb. If you stop at any point, your vehicle might just roll back down. If you've never seen the North Song, that guy, I bet you, man, if you go to the BVI and you're on Virgin Gorda, just go look at the North Song there. Anyways, so one of the early wins was we found a church on the North Song and they decided, yeah, they're going to make a food kitchen there, a soup kitchen, soup kitchen, an area where you start your cook food so that the people in the community could have something to eat. And Sam met up with some of his friends, a couple of the community leaders that were still there. And we started it. I remember the first day the soup kitchen was kicking up. We fed like 80 people. The next day we fed like 120 people. Like every single thing you do was just so rewarding. And it was a bit emotional. When I was at Spanish Town, I went over, so we had food. We had a breakfast you can choose from. We had a dinner in the evening. The cook made sure we had something to eat. We had to carry water with us all the time where we go because it's really dry up there. And then we had like small snacks you can take while you're out on the day. I remember I was at Spanish Town doing at the vet station that I set up. And I looked over and there was literally maybe 100, 200 people in the line waiting for some food. And I had a couple of snacks with me. And because I was working as the vet, someone was like, "Oh, you want me to go get food for you?" I'm like, "No, thank you. It's okay." And I couldn't eat. I just couldn't eat. I'm normally a big eater, but I could not eat because I saw so much people which may not have had another option or opportunity to eat for that day. I just couldn't eat. And then the snacks that I had on me, I remember the kids were coming around. I would sneak snacks to them and tell them, "Go over there, eat this little candy," you know. So it was only a candy or a protein bar or something, but it was probably more than they would have eaten that day. So I didn't eat any lunch for a few days. Later down the road, you'd hear the story about that one. But then I had the dinner, so I knew I would eat the dinner. So it was okay to skip a meal. And I was out there. Everybody was so invested. I remember just walking. I met this nice lady who had a dog. I forgot her name, but I'll put her up in the photos. And she went to the dump, and a lot of people abandoned their animals as well. She had this really cool dog, a kind of pit bull type dog that was abandoned in the dump. And she said she could take him in, but he had to be castrated. And she didn't know how she'd get castrated because the only vet that was left besides me. So I was the only vet in Virgin Gorda and the small islands. There was a couple of vets in Tortola handling things, but we never had the opportunity to meet each other. A breadfoot just fell in the background. Anyways, so I told her, "Don't worry, just tomorrow when we come back, we're going to do the surgery. I have surgery gears, I have anesthesia." Boom. The next day we came back. While we were finished there, she drove us to a house really quick. Right outside the house, I knocked him, castrated him. I did surgeries then and there. So that was pretty standard for me. Yeah, and I started getting really invested. All my small projects, the flamingos were getting better. Some of the lemurs were able to go back out. Had small wins, and small wins was good in situations like this. Any forward movement is a win, and we had a lot of small wins. Started sorting out what to do for the animals on the island. Made a few changes to the feeding, to get them healthy. And I went in there. I did a lot of feeding in the morning just to assess again to see how the animals were coping with the stress. There were also people around seeing how the people were coping with the stress. I remember every morning we would head off. We had a meeting every night just to say where we at, what was done today, what's going to be done tomorrow, how is everybody doing. And every department gave a small report. And that too was in the end of the day, you had a tough day, you come back home, you hear, "Oh, well, these people did that. This team get the water running again. The internet would be back up by tomorrow. Phone connection was back up. We had electricity, so the fridge didn't spoil, all this stuff. That was the small wins, and everybody was having small wins, and we were coming. Now, most of the people were there. They were heavily invested. They didn't have to be there, but they were, and that was really good. That make you feel like you were part of something bigger. Anyways, today is give you the first episode, so I'm not gonna go on forever with this. We're probably gonna split this story up in three small podcasts. I'm not sure if you hear the dogs in the background. Anyway, they're making so much noise now. But Thank you for listening to the Dr. Cartervet podcast. This is the first of many, hopefully. Um, Remember, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't as yet. If you're on YouTube listening, you can also go check out membership on the channel. Loads of cool stuff. We're monetized now, and we're going to only be growing. We thank you for helping us grow. Thank you for being part of this. Look out for the next episode in this series.